session on getting started with your NPE preparation. So many of you might just be at the beginning of your journey and wondering what it's all about, what it involves, what do you even need to do, where do you start? So hopefully we can answer a few of those questions today. And yes, the recording will be shared afterwards and popped on our YouTube. So before we get going, we'll do our acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So yes, just a note that this session is being recorded. If we do get into any discussions or questions, just making sure that we are keeping any client and particularly children's information confidential. But yes, we will open to some questions later on. And just a note that this presentation is not a substitute for your own research and learning. We do recommend consulting the board's curriculum. For ethical reasons, it's not an exam coaching session, and this is not considered supervision. All content is current information and subject to change, and this is a copyright to Psychology Squared. Alrighty, so now that we've got that out of the way, what we will be looking to do is give you a bit of an introduction to the NPE, how to enroll, the NPE outline, questions, like a practice question, I believe, on the APRA website. We'll talk you through what that looks like, ways to study and find resources, how we can help, and other additional NPE considerations that Claire and I have found particularly helpful. All right, so yes, some things we definitely get asked a lot. I think both Claire and I experienced this at the start when you do look on the APRA website and you start looking at the curriculum and the recommended reading list. Oh my goodness, how huge is that? And you start thinking, how am I possibly going to cover all of this? It can be really daunting. And so it is good to sort of start wrapping your head around it as early as you can. Are we going to go into some of this right now, Claire, or there's other slides?
We will
Yeah.
kind of lay it out. But remember at the end,
Yeah,
if you've got questions
absolutely.
and in the chat, just throw them in there.
Throw them in.
But I
Yep.
think, yeah, our aim is at the end of this that you have a better picture for what next step you'll take.
Yep.
And, I think Jess and I will share, and you'll pick that up as well, that it is a daunting task. Absolutely is. I think to placate it any other way would be I don't know anyone that we've met, and we've worked with a couple of hundred people in this space, that has ever said no, it was easy. So anyone that says that, I've got to question what it is they had, and how amazing they are just to have this as a walk in the park. So let's see how we go. Okay.
All right.
Do you want me to cover this bit, Jess?
Yeah, go ahead.
So straight out Google APRA NPE and land on their website, and this is a page that really is a great place to start. So when we get to later on a layout for study planning, this is the place to be. Really lay your foundation down to really understand what the exam's about, how you enroll, etc. So that website.
Oh, you there, Claire? Can everyone else hear me?
Dates,
Oh, you just
frequently
you
asked
just cut
questions.
out a little bit there,
Yeah.
Claire. Yeah, maybe just start that slide
Okay.
again.
Okay. Cool. No problem. So this is what the APRA website has on there, a lot. So it's the curriculum, which is for me, the biggest part to really get your teeth into. A couple of practice questions that you have. There's 4 available on their website, but after you've registered, there's another 20 you get access to. Information about the failure policy, etc. So there's a lot here, really worth going to, and just, I don't know about you, Jess, I found it like there's a link for the curriculum and a link for the guideline of the exam, and there's more information here and it can be a little bit swimmy. So saving
Mm.
is a favourite, slowing down, getting a cup of tea,
Yeah,
and just working
bookmarking it.
through and having a look. So you go, I understand now. There's a reading list, there's a curriculum, there's a manual, there's links for here, and this is just the page you come back to and just really get your teeth into. I might do this one again, Jess,
Yeah,
and then
sure.
how to. So for the enrolments on that ARPA website page, it does have how to enrol on there as well, and there's a link that you'll take, and that will take you off to a different section of ARPA. You need to create an account and enrol, and it will take a few days to get it back. So we'll come to the dates in a second to explain the registration period. So you'll need to make sure that you've done all this process in advance. They'll take your money. And then you also need to make a decision. With Jess and I will talk later about our own experiences about the sitting at home or test centre. And so there's a decision for you to make in that space as well. Anything to add on that one, Jess?
No, no. We'll get into yeah, how to choose between a test center and sitting it at
Yeah,
home. Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, so this really is something to think about, and I guess the good thing is both Claire and I have done either option, so we can speak to our experience at least. And so I might start with the test center. I did mine in a test center. A few things that influenced my decision to do that was just sort of not wanting the responsibility of having to set it up at home, set up my internet. I didn't trust it at the time. I was sort of worried, oh, if something went wrong, who's there to help me kind of thing. Um, I guess the good thing was that there are multiple test centers around. I'm based in Victoria, and so how it worked for me was that I kind of got to choose a testing center near where I am or relatively close. But I know that some people who are more rural, that's not necessarily realistic, or some people who do end up, going and traveling to, the city or wherever they're sitting it and staying the night. So a lot of different things to consider, and you obviously have to work out what's going to fit your, life and situation the best. But things that I guess I did appreciate about it was, I could just go in. Um, there was a proctor person who sort of signed us in. You could put your things somewhere. She showed me to the computer, and I sort of quickly realized it was just a computer room where people who were sitting this exam could come in and out at any time. I got some ear plugs, which was handy because of the movement around in the room. It was, I guess, reassuring to know that if anything went wrong, there was someone there. But yeah, things that I probably didn't think about was, yeah, what happens when I need to go to the bathroom? It's a very long exam. It was never going to be that I wasn't going to have to go. But interesting things to think about that, yeah, about halfway through, I was like, oh, I really need to go. And the protocol was to put my hand up, and then she could see on the video camera, because she was watching from outside the room. She could see someone needed to go to the bathroom and came in and got me and escorted me to the bathroom and back. But yeah, overall, it was a pretty easy experience for me to go in there and get it done at a testing center.
So for the OLP, which is the online proctoring, working the exam, doing the exam from home, pros and cons. It was nice to almost be in my pajamas, and to have everything around me. So when I started the exam, I was in an area I knew. I was comfortable. I wasn't stressed about driving to get anywhere. Pretty relaxed. And then when I finished, I was already home. So, I remember putting my hands on the kitchen bench after the exam, kind of going like, oh. So it was nice to be able to have, that home environment. The And it was quite simple. I just had to get my laptop camera and move it around the room to show them, what was there, that I had no notes sort of behind me. So that was sort of easy again to do. And the hardest part, I think, for me was internet stability. And you'll hear stories about people having the internet drop out on them. So that can be stressful. And I was worried about that. I hadn't thought about that prior to it. Then I started ramping up the worry in that space of what if. because I'd also planned to do what I thought was smart on the last day of the exam period. It wasn't so smart, but fortunately mine did go through. So just if you are doing online proctoring, just think about your internet stability and as well as your environment at home, as well as don't do it on the last day. That if there is a problem, you've got a period of time to be able to work with the exam people to sit it again. Otherwise, you may need to wait 3 months if it fails on that day. I also got told off for talking to myself. So I was reading a question out loud. So, there's my recommendation as part of your exam preparation is to learn not to read a question out loud. So, and that was really unsettling. I could feel the inner child in me coming like, I got told off. No, I'm not. So just think about for yourself how you prepare for the exam, that you can read a question, and they are quite lengthy. We'll show you a sample question later. So just learn to read it because they are quite wordy, aren't they, Jess? The questions aren't sort of
They
short
really
things.
are. And something we'll talk about later is, it's really a marathon. And once you get to that second half, you find yourself having to read questions a couple of times or more to make
Yeah,
sure you're really understanding the questions. I can absolutely, I mean, I would have probably been doing the same thing as just like mouthing it or, trying to word it to, talk to myself about what am I even reading here?
yeah. I
But
think even
yes,
people
it
being
takes a
told
bit
off
of
for looking.
practice and discipline. It's good to
Yeah,
practice it under exam conditions too.
that's it. I think it's even the looking away, Jess. I've heard people being told off where they've thought about a question and they're thinking and looking away, and then
Yes.
they get told off like a message comes up. And go to the toilet. It
Yes.
was nice and close for being at home, but of course I had no idea who was watching me. So I think it's very much like a Zoom session here where they sit and watch multiple people. So I had to sort
Yes.
of do a wave and go, need to go to the toilet. Is that okay? So it's a little bit of that. And I just kind of got up from my chair and was waiting for some sort of prompt. And I just sort of walked off to the toilet and I came back and I'm like, we're all good. Again, no one there watched, no one communicated with me, but it seemed to be okay. So a little bit of mystery in that space. But so you choose for you what works well, and just there's. I think the other thing with the online was um, I wasn't sure it was starting right, and you had to load software on your computer. And when it came to that time, and you're sitting there and you're revving up ready, and then it's not working, and then all of a sudden it starts, and then all of a sudden the exam starts. You're like, oh, we're going. So there is that little bit of uncertainty as well. So I didn't prepare for any of that anxiety that was going to come into that space. So the first few questions was, did feel like a rabbit in the spotlight, just trying to make sure we were on, we're going, we're okay. So I think if I had understood that, I would have probably been a bit more prepared to feel that way because it took a little bit of time for all that to settle down.
Mm.
All right. Oh, sorry, on the side there. So we've got David Lopez has done some blogs on this. There is the APRA website to really read through and understand more about it. And we do have a Facebook page, which I'll give you a link for later, as well as there's lots of other ones out there on the NPE. So just get yourself busy and looking into that as well. All right, Jess.
All right. Yes. Other things to consider are the dates and the costs. And so there are 4 exam periods throughout the year. And so you kind of just have to keep posted on when the exam periods are. Here we go. And so we're currently we've just finished an exam period. So the next one will be starting on the 4th of August until the 22nd of August. But you do have to register by so yeah, exam registration period is between the 9th of June to the 18th of July. So you do have to make sure that you do that prior so you're well prepared to sit those dates. The cost is $450, so it is not cheap. I know that that absolutely can be a barrier for some people, and and particularly if you don't pass and then you have to sit it again, you do have to pay that cost again. So yes, it is tricky. It's quite a consideration that has to go into it, I know, for a lot of people. All right, so getting stuck into, I guess, a bit more of the nitty-gritty of the exam, there are 4 key domains. So we've got ethics, which really touches on all the legal, ethical dilemmas, professional issues that just inevitably come up in psychology. And so this is, obviously an extremely important one to wrap your head around and get a lot of practice in. Assessments, we go through test selection, use and interpretation. There are 6 selected tests that are in the APRA curriculum that of assessments that you need to know really well, like in quite a lot of detail, really understanding how to administer, how to score, like the ones that you really need to know in and out. But there are also another 20, is it 23? 20,
23. Yep.
23, that's the magic number, of other specific assessments that you need a like more of a basic understanding. So sort of understanding what they're for. I know it's tricky to distinguish, what's a basic understanding of this? How do I know if I know enough? How do I not go down a huge rabbit hole? We do luckily have a few resources here at Psychology Squared that can help with that. But yes, that's what assessment is really about. And I think application there is really important too. And something I often tell people is there's really nothing better when you're studying assessments than doing the assessment and actually practicing it. Practice, administering and scoring and interpreting. Intervention, obviously the knowledge of evidence-based counselling skills, different interventions, which ones are the sort of gold standard for particular diagnoses. It also covers psychopharmacology, which is another one. I've already mentioned rabbit hole here, that you can really go down a rabbit hole. We have a good recording on this as well, to help guide people. I think something I just like to highlight is, when you're getting into psychopharmacology, just remember that you're a psychologist and not a psychiatrist. So that's probably a good, way to take a step back sometimes and go, wait, does a psychiatrist need to know this, or does a psychologist need to know this?
Look, and
Um,
just
yeah,
if I
go
can
for
add
it.
the other part of that is, if you've got a burning curiosity to know which part of the brain is impacted by an antipsychotic, whether it's this pathway or this pathway, great, flag it, put it aside, and when you finish the exam, come
Yeah.
back and nerd out in that field.
Yes, exactly right. And so I haven't mentioned yet, but each of those first 3 domains that I've just mentioned have 45 questions each in those domains. And then communication is technically the smallest with 15 questions. However, I guess a word of caution in that, don't get complacent with communication, because really at the end of the day, communication is very much interwoven into all of the domains. Because when it comes to communication, it's, how are you communicating in this ethical dilemma? How are you communicating to stakeholders when you're telling them assessment results? How are you communicating when you're providing evidence-based intervention? So I think some people go, oh, it's communication. I'll kind of, leave that to the end, or I won't think about that too much. And in the past, some of the feedback we've got from people have been, oh, I wish I spent a bit more time on communication. And, look, there'll probably be always something when you come away from the exam and go, oh, I wish I spent a bit more time on that. For me, it was personality assessments. I was like, didn't practice that. But this is the way it's broken up. So 150 questions. The pass rate is 70%, and I believe it gets scaled each time because every exam period there is a different set of questions. Um, Sorry, was there a question in the chat? Do they ask about psychometric characteristics of scales? Oh, Claire, can you answer that?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say for the main 6 that Jess mentioned, like the WACE, the WIS, the PAI, the DAS, the, oh my gosh, the K10, and there's one more, the can't remember.
Uh,
So for those, you need to know it inside out. So absolutely, you need to know what a scale is, and the block design, and where does that land? Those sort of questions, as well as scoring, what invalidates, what are like the PAI, what are the scales? So what are these
mm,
subtests? What do they measure? What would it tell you? What would critical answer be? How are you going to respond to that? So there's a lot you absolutely need to know it, and as Jess suggested, doing them, it helps. So if you haven't already done them as part of your internship, this is part of your exam preparation, getting to know them.
mm,
So the psychometric characteristics. So I'm trying to understand exactly what you're asking there. I'm thinking you're talking about the scoring process and what. Goodness me, I'm even trying to exactly understand what your question is asking. Do you want to put that in the chat? We'll come back to that one. So the
Yeah, we'll
short
come
story is the
back. Yeah,
six
if you can
main. Yeah.
expand a little bit, we'll try and get to that. I do have another question here. Does the 70% pass rate refer to what you need to get to pass? Yes, yes, correct. Yeah, 70%. Yeah, getting 70% of the answers correct is technically how you pass. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
sorry, Samira, just go back and add some more into that space. But I think, oh yeah, thank you, validity and reliability. Anything that applies to as an assessment of those main six, you need to know inside out, back to front, upside down, sideways. There's a lot to learn, and
Mm.
100% you need to know, like face validity. Like if a question in the PAI again is about harm or suicidality and the risks are high, when you're, as a psychologist, you're administering this test, you don't say to the client then, well, thanks for coming and see you later. We have a responsibility to make sure that we're looking at the data and understanding what this means to the person that's there, just not
Mm.
looking at a pure um, chart. Now, in regards to reliability, yeah, there's for the six main, this is the detail you need. APRA says for the other 23, it's use and purpose. And as Jess said, there is absolutely some vagueness in that space. What does that mean? But you would need to be around and understanding what they're for, how you might use them, and probably not as much detail as how we would describe it. It's really hard. We start leaning into exam coaching if we give too much, but go back to the APRA curriculum, have a good read of their wording, and you will find that it is vague.
Mm.
I think that's a fair statement. So just
Yeah.
explore, subject to how much time you have, as to how detail you go into each of those. It's really hard to give you guidance on that one. I'm sorry, it's really hard.
Mm.
Would you add to that, Jess?
Yeah, no, I just completely agree with everything you said. I think the only thing that might be worth touching on this slide is kind of, thinking about how much time you have on each question, seeing as we've got, there's 150 questions here. It's a 3.5 hour exam. It's not a lot of time for each question, but I guess, the way I sort of look at it is, look, there'll be some questions you read and you go, oh, yeah, it's that answer. And there'll be some that are kind of the larger vignette style that you kind of have to read. And we'll look at a bit of an example later, but that you do have to read a couple of times and it will take you a bit longer. They're all multiple choice. I believe it's at, A to E. Um, and you always choose one answer. Some practice questions out there have, things where they go, oh, it's A and B, or it's all of the above. The questions in the APRA exam are not like that. You always choose one. But of course, multiple choice is one of the most difficult ways to test people. And, there will always be, a couple of answers there really that you're like, oh God, it could be either of these two. And you narrow it down to two and then have to pick the best answer you possibly can. I think another just thing that I might flag while we're talking about that is that in the exam, you can flag questions for later. There's a little red flag that you can click on the screen that just helps you if you're really unsure and you want to come back to it later. You can do that, which I think is good for peace of mind. But on the flip side, you don't want to, click on too many and then have too many to review at the end. You don't want to go against your sort of gut response sometimes, but yeah, it's all multiple choice. Yeah, no extended responses or worded responses, correct. Yeah.
I'm just going to go back to one point that you raised, Jess, that I think is
Mm.
good to give perspective on what Samira was asking. Is that when you think about the assessment domain, so you've got the six main and then you have the 23 others, so the maths is 29. Park that aside. You then have the DSM in that domain as well, of which they say there are 20 to know, but it's not 20, it's more like about 45, 50, because when you think it says to you about bipolar disorders, well, we know there's not one. We know there's more than two. So, now we're branching out. It does say feeding disorders, of which there are 7. So you can see how the maths is escalated. So let's just do a quick round number that we've got 50
Oh,
disorders to know, because even and the 29 assessments. So we're up to already, if you just knew had one question per exam on each topic, we're already at 80 questions, 80 topics to know. And if you were able to say of those 6 main assessments and each DSM component that you could answer five or six questions quite easily, then you can say, have I got a broad knowledge? But like all exams, all our uni exams, they'll always have HD level questions that you're just not going to know. So subject to your time and where you are, like, there'll be a question. I think I looked at that, I studied that, but I didn't ask that one component. So it's going to happen, And we'll keep moving on with this. Please keep the questions coming.
all right. So yes, the actual exam, 150 questions. Oh, we did touch on that. You can flag some and to allow yourself a bit of time to review. I think upon reflection, Claire and I have both noticed we probably flagged around 20 or 25 questions in the end. I found that when I started going back over them, I was like, oh, what am I doing? Like, what if I change the question and I was actually right the first time. It's a little tricky, but it is good to go back and just out of peace of mind, just double check, oh, do I still agree with that answer that I put in there? Um,
Definitely put an answer in.
yeah, yeah, and just always put an answer in. Yeah, never leave an answer blank. Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of practice questions, there are a lot of places to get practice questions now. There are 4 practice questions on the APRA website. I think they're more designed to give you a bit of a sense of what the questions look like. We often get asked, oh, are they, is that the level of difficulty that I can expect in the exam? I would probably say they're on the easier side, just to give people a sense of what they look like. When you do enroll, and I believe this is when you have access to the portal, Claire, is that right? Then you get another 20 practice questions. Again, I wouldn't sit there thinking, oh, these are the real tricky, juicy ones that I'm going to get in the exam, but a really good way to just see if you're on track. I think if you're doing well in those, you'll know you're on the right page at least, and keep doing what you're doing. There's the Pelling and Burton book with 100 practice questions at the back. I really relied on this quite a lot when I studied. And I would say still to this day that those questions are definitely on the quite difficult side. This book is one example where they do things like, oh, is it all of the above or is it A and C and things like that? Ignoring that, I think it's a great place. The way I used it was to go, I'm going to practice 10 questions tonight. I'm going to score myself. Oh, I can see I need to read up on this, area and this area because I got those wrong. And then I would go back into the book and, refresh my memory on that particular topic. We also have 291, very not round number there on Kahoot, questions by Psychology Squared, and scenario group recordings, I believe, on Q Live. Is that right, Claire? Of practice questions that we've done.
We do, which will come and explain that as well.
Yeah,
I'm just going to add also that the Facebook group, you'd see that Jess and I put up each week questions on there as well. Um,
yeah,
so there's lots of ways to test your knowledge.
yeah.
And I think when Jess and I will talk more about later on, and I appreciate the question that came in before about the period for study, we'll talk about this, how this leads into it as well. So we'll just keep moving through the content. Here we are.
All right.
So we'll just give you enough time. So just notice what happens inside of you as you start reading it, and just have a look at this question. We're not here today to teach and train you on the questions. We just want to give you a sample so you start to get an idea of what this is. So let's have a look. I think just for time, we just might leave you with that. Um, two things. One, go to the APRA website. There's the 4 questions there. Go through it, have a look. They provide a massive explanation as well on this type of question. Um, but usually what you'll notice here is most of the questions have maybe 2 good answers. And then you've really got to go back. This is the part where you've got to keep self-regulating and, looking at the time, managing the clock, reading a question, slowing down, moving your mind from the last 4 questions where you think, did I quite get that right about Betty, then Susie, then Jenny, then Peter, and now I'm here at this one. And keep your focus on there. Go back and read the question. Is it asking which one is not, which one is the least, which one is the most, what is the best, and really reading what it says. And then you've got to think, well, sometimes all of them are right. It's like, oh, hold on, what's the next best step? And reading the question well. So think about your own exam preparations all through uni and what you did and what worked well for you. There's all the different strategies about reading the question twice. And
Mm.
there's no pen and paper, so you can't note things down. You just got to be so much working memory required.
Yeah. Yeah, this
Um,
is really one. This is probably a great example of one that you might have to read a few times because what is it really asking me? Is it asking about, workers' compensation things? Is it talking about subpoenas? Is it about therapy? Is it about bullying? Like, there's so many elements to this that you need to just take a step back sometimes and being like, what am I really being asked here?
mm, mm.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Yes, the duration of the exam, as we mentioned, is 3.5 hours long. And I think something I probably didn't even think about going into it is just how long that really is. Like, wrap your head around how long that is to sit and concentrate. And for me, like, I'll be honest, I like chunking work, like good, bursts of work. And that's how I kind of studied for the exam. Like, I can really only do like 25 minutes solid at a time. And then I kind of need a bit of a break. So 3.5 hours was really tough for me, and I think I would have found doing it at home really difficult, Claire, because I absolutely fidget and look around and do things like that. But it's a marathon, and you will feel absolutely exhausted by the end of it, if not by the halfway mark. That was something I found very, very noticeable. That after halfway, even simple questions I was having to read a couple of times. So it is quite exhausting, and that's why we really encourage you. You know, we know the brain is a muscle, so practicing under exam conditions, I think, is another thing that will, do you a bit of a favor in preparation for this. Um, think about toilet breaks, like I mentioned before, review time, like, kind of try to keep yourself on track, like plan, there's 150 questions, it's 3.5 hours. So by that halfway mark, hopefully I'm about halfway through the exam. Maybe that's a time to go for a break. And just to note, if you go for a toilet break, that doesn't mean you get an extra 5 minutes on the exam. That's all inclusive of the 3.5 hours. There's a clock on the screen to sort of keep you on track too. So do think about, take a step back sometimes and go and see how you're tracking. Am I spending a bit too long on some of these questions? Do I need to pick an answer, flag it, and come back to it to keep up with the pace? Um, and yeah. So did you want to talk about that
That's a
last
bit of,
bit, Claire?
yeah, that's a bit of my maths at the end is you'll often
Yeah.
hear people do the 3.5 hours and 150 calculation and you get 1.4
Yeah.
per minutes per question. But I don't think that's the reality. If you're allowing a 10-minute break for a toilet, I don't know about your bladders, but that's a long time to go. And especially if trying to concentrate as it's, as well as allowing, say, 30 minutes at the end for review. It's really down to just over a minute per question. And there are some questions that will say, which one of the following is not a fruit? Apple, pear, banana, boot. You're like, tick, done, next. And then there'll be questions that have those longer vignettes and even longer questions. And you're like, oh, I gotta keep my eyes peeled on the screen. I can't read the question to myself. Focus. And so you got to just, yeah, get your fitness going is what I think we're suggesting. And mine
Mm.
was the 2 hour mark. I remember thinking, oh no, can't even do a, I've got to
Yeah.
keep my eyes on the screen. So I was just like,
Yeah.
so definitely a fitness to develop there for 3.5 hours of focus. So when we talk about what we've made available for you, should you want to go down that pathway, I think there's one of the recordings I've done for 3 hours on intervention strategies. So if you're watching, listening to my dulcet tones, and you're at a point where you're like, I need a break, just pause and think, can I push on? This is the exhaustion that Claire and Jess
Mm.
were talking about. So cool. All right. We'll keep going on.
Yes, the results. So while I said 70%, you still must pass each domain. Um, and, really fun. There's a 4 to 6 week wait to get to your results. So, I think something I'd like to think I did well was honestly after the exam. You could have told me I failed and I wouldn't have been surprised. You could have told me I passed and I probably would have been pleasantly surprised. But I really came out of that exam not knowing how well I had gone. It's really, I don't think I've met anyone who really had a good idea or thought, oh, yeah, I think I nailed that. It's a really kind of odd, unique experience that us psychologists have to go through, because it is so difficult that it's just, it seems to me, everyone I've spoken to, just impossible to kind of gauge how well you've gone. So, try not to put too much pressure on yourself. Like, all I would say is when you get out of there, get out of that exam, don't kind of, there's, to me, there's no point kind of, racking your brain about what you got right and wrong and things like that, and looking back on it, because it's done now. And you have to wait for at least 4 to 6 weeks to get your results. So there's no point being anxious about it for that long. Try to just look after yourself, a bit of self-care, really. What some people do is enroll to secure a place for the next exam, just in case they haven't done well, or they don't pass. And then they can cancel it if they do, and you can get a refund there. So that's just what some people like to do afterwards, because again, it's really hard to know if you've done well or not. Keep your notes tidy. Don't throw them out. So while I say don't harp on and rack your brain on how well you did, also don't throw your notes into the wind. Maybe keep them handy just in case. And plan emotionally for both pass or fail. Again, I think, for me, I'd kind of gotten to a point where I was like, I think I've just done everything I can do. I couldn't, I've studied as much as I think I can. I was kind of just ready to get it over and done with, and just thought, worst case, you know what? Worst case, I fail. And then I've learned from the exam experience. And that's kind of where I was at, because I just got to a point where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do myself any favors by continuing to study. I think I just need to see how I go. The results are emailed. If you pass, it basically just says pass, and you don't get any sort of insight into where you went well and didn't go well. If you fail, more information is provided on each domain, so you do get more of a sense of what you might need to work on. And like I've probably mentioned over and over again, it can be a really deflating process. And so self-care is just so, so important, both before and after. Something I like to remind people is that, you know, in the lead up to the exam, some people like to take a week or two off to study. I would just say, be rational with yourself too about particularly things like the night before. Don't, there's no point cramming, particularly if you've spent months studying, there's no point cramming the night before. That's really when you want to make sure your brain is rested, right? Get a good night's sleep, maybe go for a walk in the morning, make sure you eat well, things like that, that as a psychologist will set your brain up to be in the best position possible, well rested, relaxed, and alert, to sit the exam well. And if you fail, it's really not an indication of your ability as a psychologist. And I really, really believe that. It is a bloody difficult exam to sit, and not all of us do well under exam conditions. It's not easy. But worst case, I feel, is that you learn from that experience if you don't make it. Would anything you'd add
I
to
think
that,
that,
Claire?
yeah, I think, we've worked with some amazing people that when we've run groups in the past or had sessions in the past, who have had amazing articulating brains, that can see problems, who have failed. And you get a response from up, it shows you where you went on the domains. You don't get if you pass; if you fail, you do. And it's just, it's heartbreaking because these people have been amazing. But I think there's some exam fitness you've got to definitely prepare for. So it's just not building your knowledge, it's building applied knowledge, and then it's building your exam readiness to sit. So, when just having that ability to go question next, question next, question next. And I think that's sort of where some people come unraveled, or they spend too much time and they haven't paid attention to the clock, and they've, yeah, so lots of things can go wrong. So I I feel like I'm sending a message here to anyone that has passed the first time, which, I was fortunate to do that. It's humbling, and you don't know whether you just slid over the line or whether you nailed it. So I think
Mm.
it's, as a community, as provisional psychologists and psychologists, we have to bring a lot of support to each other in this space. So if you are someone that has failed, it's just really difficult hurdle to just nail. So
Yeah.
respect.
Absolutely. And there's a question here around what's the number of times you can take the exam? So my understanding is 3, but then you would be in consultation with APRA about what you may need to do, moving forward before you can sit it again. Is that right, Claire?
That's my understanding too.
Yeah.
And same time is really work with your supervisor in that space as well. Um, make sure that you have got yourself really geared up with them, making sure you, when you go through a whole lot of questions, if you are doubting yourself, you can push the exam out. Appreciate we're all on the provisional journey and you've got a time frame, which we're going to come and talk to you about that in a sec. So yeah, definitely exam fitness.
It
Yes, as
really
I
is.
said, it was a 2 hour mark for me that I just was just like, just
This is
fatigue hit.
hard.
It's just so yeah, look, that's a recommendation. Find a way to sit down and watch something for 3 hours, and don't wiggle, don't worm in the chair, don't
Yeah.
take your eye contact away, don't look back exhausted, going, don't spin on your chair. You'll find it. But yeah, take that on board. All right, let's keep moving. Okay.
Um,
Mm.
all right, what might a study plan look like? Yes, so obviously this is going to be different for everybody. First, we'd say, yeah, get organized, wrap your head around it, and then kind of, work back about, how what's going to work for you. So this is where we'll get into, I guess, what each of us did. Claire and I definitely had different study, but journeys, which is probably good for you to sort of see, what works for different people. I think I gave myself about 2 to 3 months to study. And I was very question heavy focused initially. I liked the idea of seeing, like, let's practice the questions and then I'll just work on what my weaknesses are. And so I kind of worked back that way. I had to chunk it up. A lot of us we're working full time too, and it's difficult to find time on the weekends and um, so I kind of chunked it up. I tried to do maybe half an hour to an hour most nights of the week. So smaller blocks. Every now and then I tried to do a bigger block on the weekend, if I could, but I did find it hard to do bigger blocks of study with just everything I had going on with my life at the time. And so, like I said, probably a good example of what I did was use that Pelling book. I didn't have all the Kahoots and things at the time, but I used that Pelling book. I did 10 questions a night. I was pretty good and disciplined at doing that, 10 questions a night, and then reading what I got wrong, reading up on on the answers that I got wrong. But make a plan, create, mine was a pretty loose plan, but I had the sort of rules in my own mind of what I wanted to do. I did try and talk to colleagues and people that I was studying with at the time as well. Think about your networks. I did have a few meetings with yeah, with people I went to uni with when we would try and do a few practice questions together. I found it was good overall, but it lacked a bit of structure. And I think that's where some of the, groups that we've run have been really helpful in just having a bit of structure there around, practice questions for each domain. And yeah, just keep testing your knowledge. But that was pretty much my journey. You can go speak to yours now, Claire.
And I think I've got a slide just to bring it all together at the end. But Jess was a 5+1er. I was a 4 plus
Yes.
2er. The work I was doing, when I was sort of working 8 to 10 hours a day just to make my KPIs and to come home and do study at the end was hard. So I would do a block on the weekend. And I hadn't even looked at a whisk or a waist. So when you think about the prep for that, if you haven't even touched one of those, that's like minimum 20 hours worth of reading, looking, testing, poking around. So if you have done any of the 29 assessments, then you can consider how your study would be different to say what mine was, where I had to go through each one and go,
Mm.
what is this thing called PAI? and dive into it. So, that's something to consider for your time. And as well as, if you haven't worked across different domains and you haven't been exposed to pharmacology, then you've got the research to do in there as well. So it definitely do vary. And I was definitely more like a 6 to 12 month ramp upper, just plodding my way through it, building my knowledge. And that probably fed a bit more into like a more of a naturist approach. But I just didn't want to fail it. I just wanted to get
Mm.
this done. So I just wanted to get it done once, sit it once, and pass it. That was my aim or my motivation.
But you make a
Right.
good point there, Claire, because yeah, the 5+1 versus 4+2 is a big difference. Because I say, oh, I took a few, I did a few months, but really I did the whole, you know, the master's year where we were practicing all those assessments. So it kind of was like, training for a year to do it. So, you had to do that all on your own. And so no wonder our journeys looked so different. But, at
Yeah,
the end
and
of the day, mm,
yeah, and the organisations didn't have all these assessments, so I had to go off on the internet and try and
mm,
find where I could find them, and jumping onto Pearce's websites trying to find out what was for free. So yeah, that was like another layer of work that no one needs to
yeah.
hear about. We'll just move on. All right, so let's talk through some free resources because on top of your 450, there's money that you've got to spend. But if you can get the free resources done, rather than spend the 3 grand that the reading list is about, there are things you can do for free. So, K10 SDQ mandatory reporting, for example, the code of ethics that we use is the APS code of ethics. That's for free. Of course, being alumni, you have access to a lot of journal articles. The state libraries have a lot as well. Amazing YouTube. And, Jess and I've talked before about how you get sick of reading. Like it's all very black and white. And you're trying to store it in. Sometimes sitting back, kicking back, and letting someone else do the talking and explaining. And I found someone like Dr. Tracy Marks was a good example for me. But you'll find your own. I've also been, I think Jess and I talk in the pharmacology video about mnemonics that get used in this space, and there's some really cool ones in that area too. So subject to your brain and your style, find those processes. There are some free courses like the Dulwich Centre in Adelaide runs a really great one on narrative therapy, so that can take time. So subject to your ramp up for the exam, and I know there was a question earlier about sitting in August, you might not want to hop on the Dulwich website and find that free course and work your way through it. You just might want to go, hi ChatGPT, give me a snapshot of narrative therapy, bam, done. Um, the There's two main entities that some psychologists are with, which is the AAPI and there's the APS. Everyone's different for the reasons for why they'll join one or the other. You might be both. They have great libraries too. They have the DSM, they have books in there as well. There's often free webinars. So have a poke through those two, part of your preparation too. Of course, we've all got bookshelves full of library books from uni. If you've done case reports or case studies, I know for me they were great. Like I was forced to really look at the structure of, say, CBT for someone with a panic disorder. So I had to really look into detail for what the diagnosis was. And then I had to really look at how CBT would apply for that treatment in relation also, say, to a DAS that I was working on and a before and after intervention to see what the difference was and critically analyze what this meant for this person. So bringing the person back into the room. So if you haven't done any case reports, that's probably going to add to your learning. But if you have done them, there's a lot of things you already would have ticked off. And again, there's some fantastic Facebook groups out there. Find them. In addition to Psychology Squared, go find them. Have a look at what they have out there as well, and you'll find your groove in that space too. Yeah, I think that's probably enough on the free resources. Anything, Jess, you want to add to that?
No, that's all good. Yep.
Cool. So paid, of course, the recommended reading list, sorry. So on the APRA website again, there's a recommended reading list. I'm going to come back to what we've done to support you in that space in a second. And there's a stack of resources you've got to have knowledge around. And there's a lot of books and a lot of money you can spend if you can't get them through the libraries. So absolutely sit down and start reading. If you think if you've got a year's ramping up to it, you'll have time for all that. There's lots of really cool paid as well as free PDs on different therapies and diagnosis. There's some fantastic stuff out on YouTube. And there's also other organisations, as we mentioned before, that might do some things on NPE that might suit you. But really it's finding, there's live and then there's pre-recorded content. You've got to work out what you need, and then also consider, as we said before, your history of study. So I'll just move on for that one, just noticing the time. I'm just going to go through the Site Squared tools. So most of you probably have come from our Facebook page. So the links will also be there to the website as well. And when you land on the website page, you'll be able to see at the top, like all websites, the banner that goes to the NPE tools. So we've just made a little bit of a change to some of the things that we've done. We'll just keep adapting and rolling with what the demand is from people. So the first one we have is the Q Live on demand. So we run live courses before, and we're just transitioning in that space. So we have left the recordings live there you can purchase. We've done 8 hours between Jess, Amanda, and myself. We've done the 8 hours of questions, scenarios, explanations, discussions on topics, different questions. And we give you 6 months access to that. So you can sign up to that one. And of course, again, you can watch, rewatch, and even speed us up. The things that are included in that is it's like a course style environment, lots of questions as I explained, and you also get the readiness checklist and the resource finder. So the APRA reading list, we've turned that into an Excel doc that has a whole lot of hyperlinks through it, and a nice, clear, succinct list of what domain they are and where you could find and what the approximate cost is. So that is $100 for the Q Live. The next tool we have is the 365, and that's $300, but there's a stack more included. So again, it's the contents, Jess, Amanda, and I again doing a whole lot of recordings, and it's 12 months access for you. And again, you can watch, rewatch the content. This is what we've got included. It's a lot. So we've gone, it's more than 12 hours now. We've done a lot more recording than the 12 hours worth of just content, plus the 8 hours. So it's more than 20 hours worth of us talking through NPE content. And we go through each of the domains. We've got questions on each of the domains. We've got additional links and resources in there. So it's pretty comprehensive. And then we have the 291 Kahoots questions. There's an AI tool that we've created as well, which is, when I create the weekly questions for you guys on Facebook, I'm jumping into our AI tool and I'm saying, create an NPE question. I think today I did motivation interviewing and schizophrenia. So type it in, give me a question on that one, and it didn't come back hard enough. So I go back and say, nah, come on, make it harder. Or no, psychologists wouldn't think like that. How else could you turn that around? And it's a beautiful tool. So think about using the bots that are available in that space as well. The Q Live's all included in this, the readiness checklist, the resource finder I mentioned before, and that you can start anytime. So you've got that access and you just work through the domains that you need. Just one thing I'm just going to go back to before I go further than that. So we're transitioning. We're just playing with making some changes to adding more content that's more live content. We're just really just bedding that down. So there's more content still coming onto 365. So it's an evolving tool. We're available. You get access to us. So when we do sort out exactly how we're going to do the next phase of questions, we'll let you know through the Facebook group, and we'll also let you know if you have already signed up to the 365. Jess, anything to add on the 365 or Q Live or this slide?
Oh no, not I don't think to add on to anything you've said. I think you're across that a lot more than I am. And yes, that we are in that transition phase, but there are so many incredible resources there that I absolutely wish I had when I was studying. So
Same.
it's just so good that it's there. I guess with this, if you're happy to just quickly talk about this, I think these are just some really pertinent questions to ask yourself to get a sense of what kind of study plan and journey is right for you. How disciplined are you? Do you know if you set yourself some rules or some targets, are you going to actually stick to those? When are you going to, how much time do you want to give yourself? Do you know if you're going to stay on track? What have you learnt to date? How will you check in with others and their study to do, a quick comparison? I think even if you're an independent learner, at some point you find yourself wanting to know, hey, are you on the same page too? Like, have I done enough here, or am I on the right track? So it's good to check in, even if you like to study on your own. And how tech savvy are you? All those sorts of things I think are really important. And I think something that I really like is that readiness checklist that we've got in both of those packages, just to see if you're if you are on track or not. At least it's like a really clear cut way to kind of just see, what where you're at, I suppose. Yeah.
This
All
is
right.
us.
This is
So
us.
just yeah. So this is the team. So David Lopez owns it, who's a board-approved supervisor and the owner of Psychology Squared. So, but Jess and I are the two main facilitators with Amanda for the NPE content. So we just want to introduce ourselves at the end. Okay. Just a few things before we'll open up to questions. Just a few things that we just want to make sure we cover off for you on the NPE. And we've kind of addressed this, so I'll just summarize it very quickly. So think about your pathway, think about what you already know. Like, you're not starting from the beginning, you already are 4 to 5 years post commencing your psych journey. You're already working in the job, so there's things you already know. What we're just
Oh, Claire, I think you've just cut out there. I might just continue on
you're
for.
getting your knowledge and making sure that you can apply. Am I
Oh,
back?
sorry, Claire, you just cut
Am I
out there a
back?
little bit, but I think you're really talking about, yeah, the job difference, things that you know from your job. For example, I worked in early childhood, so I got a lot of experience administering assessments. So that was great practice for me, but didn't get to do personality assessments. And that was definitely a weak point for me in the actual exam. So, think about what you do day to day and where are your weak points and what you need to go out and practice. But
Yeah,
yeah, we
nice.
mentioned case reports. They're also a great way to really get your learning, particularly around, I think, diagnoses and differential diagnoses. That really gets you going on, on those sorts of things, interventions. Practice those assessments, properly where you can. And the other things to consider here are, yeah, when you plan to end your internship, like, are you really going to leave it to the very end of your internship, or do you want to do it a bit earlier? Because worst case, if you don't pass and that was the last thing, you're going to have to extend your internship for another 3 months. So probably best not to leave it to the very, very end.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind. All right, very quickly, just seeing the time, we've almost had an hour. We've got a few more things we just want to go through with you, and there's actually a discount code I want to offer to you as well. So think about your study plan. This is, for me, I feel even stressed looking at the speed of this. This doesn't suit me. This is probably showing you how you can do it if you're really focused and going to work hard. But me, I would be timesing that by 2 for where I was at the my journey for the 4+2 exam process. So think about you, what you need, what it's going to look like. I think we would be suggesting you probably picking it up that about getting organised, diarising it, making it a schedule. So if someone says, "Do you want to go for coffee?" You're like, can't at the moment. I'll catch you in 3 months' time. So you decide for yourself whether that's appropriate. Um, I think just also add to this very quickly again, your learning style, work out for you how you work, how do you study, how do you restore things. Go back to all the knowledge you know about memory, how it's, you want to learn something, you just don't hear it once, you've got to work out how you're going to share that. I have two cats that are very informed on psychology, where I will walk to them and I'll pick one up and I'll say to them, "So, what do you know about motivation for you? Do you know about ambivalence?" And the cats are always very grateful for that knowledge. So work out who in your life you can share something about the various things
It's
you're going to
always
learn.
good to practice explaining your learning. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Jess touched on this before, so just think about your self-care. It is definitely leading up on in the exam, and then definitely post, and then waiting for the results. And no matter whether you pass or fail, even opening up the exam was stressful. So just keep that in mind and just work on how you can take care of yourself. And I think this is the thing we would talk about often is what would you tell a client and how do you take that on board for yourself? Anything more on that, Jess, before we move on?
Yeah, no, I just second that completely. It's an emotional roller coaster, and so be kind to yourself.
Yeah. All right. So I'll leave that on the screen that you can just have a quick read of that one. But I think we've kind of dot pointed this out for
Yeah.
you already. Just get started. Kind of is where
Mm.
we're landing. So we've got a few Facebook pages. There's the NPE group, and that's where Jess and I put some questions up. And there's also the Site Squared main website too that has a lot more content. And there's just search more through Facebook NPE. We're not about just us. Keep yourself across the board what's available. Definitely go and bring up the APRA page. And again, Psych Squared has a few tools in there for you. We do have as well a logbook and a case report as well. So sometimes when you're in this early stage, it could be something else well you want to have a look at. We've got some various videos and things in that space too. There's a lot of content, and we always welcome a question. If you're not sure if this is for you, just ask us. There's a contact us page. Send a